Alright, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBO or Black Box Online Radio. Now, the topic today is going to be a very simple question. Was Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn a KGB agent? Very famous Russian author, very involved in criticizing the Soviet Union, as well as, many things associated with that, but was he a KGB agent? Well, before we get into that, we have to discuss the origin of this question. I was watching a Q&A session with none other than Dr. Jordan Peterson. You either love him or hate him, nothing in between. And somebody asked him, a question, because Peterson praises Solzhenitsyn a lot, particularly for two things: his book, The Gulag Archipelago, and for his poem, The Trail. The Trail is at least 7,000 lines long and between 7,000 and 7,500 lines long. I've only been able to read part of it, but it's like he composed it without the use of pen or paper while he was in the Gulag. And he composed this over a period of years, but he was able to remember it all using mnemonic devices, and the Solzhenitsyn Center says, they have a lot to say about it. I subscribe to their mailing list, just looking into this a little. But a student asked Peterson the question. He said, I have a history professor who said that the only way that Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn could have created a 7,500-line poem and remembered it, over a period of years without the use of any pen or paper is if he had been a KGB agent. What do you think about that? And, that's kind of where we are today, and that's what's going on with this one here. So it's just sort of, was Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn, secretly working for the KGB? I'm very surprised that, Dr. Jordan Peterson, who is a clinical psychologist, didn't flat out say things in a much more direct manner. The first thing we could say to that is, yes, it is possible for a person to remember 7,500 lines of, text from memory. I mean, someone can physically do that. The human brain is capable of doing that. Now, do not quote me on this. But I read once that the human brain has the ability to successfully remember 300,000 words. I read that years ago because I made a comment once that the human capacity for knowledge was infinite, and somebody showed me some kind of snippet of something that said the human brain can remember around 300,000 words. Don't quote me on that if you're going to be putting that into a research paper or something. Cite Black Box Radio if anyone ever do that. No, please do not. That's just going off of a faded memory from, 15 years ago. But when we get into the discussion, I try to approach these things with an open mind, and I began to investigate this a little, and you just put that, into Google. I was shocked that, absolutely nothing came up. If this historian, that kid's professor, that kid who, said that he had a professor, I shouldn't call him a kid, young adult, college students, right? That young adult's professor, is like, Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn was a KGB agent, I thought there would be more supporting material. Absolutely nothing came up in Google. Not a single blog. I couldn't find a single YouTube video that was dedicated solely to that. Normally with these sort of either conspiracy theories or alternative historical models, there's at least somebody talking about it on the internet, to great length and, elaborating or giving some sort of explanation. So one of the big things that I would say about this is, and I know this isn't the most fun thing to hear, but always be careful about these alternative historians. And, I guess I come at this from some kind of slanted thing because about 4 years ago I was running this blog where we tried to, explore crazy alternative historical things. And did the ancient Egyptians actually discover New Zealand? Did the ancient Greeks discover Australia? Did the Mende tribe of Sierra Leone discover Peru? I mean, there are all kinds of, alternative historical things out there. Now, what we got to say about alternative historians, some people are less outrageous than that. And one of the things, just the heart and soul of that issue is, either they are 100% correct and they are brilliant, and just no one came to the same conclusion because they were wrong, and this alternative historian is stunningly brilliant, or they are saying something that will never be disproven, so they'll never have to be accountable for it. And it's not to say that they are lying, because, they could just be saying something that, it's like proving a negative. How do you prove that Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn was not a KGB agent? They're either saying something, that is very far out, that they will never have to be accountable for. So it's very difficult to accept, alternative historical things without a lot of supporting facts. So I can maybe understand more why, when some guy is asked that question, was Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn a KGB agent? He's just kind of blank. But we do have to recap the first one. The human brain is capable of, remembering 7,500 lines of text, and, very little supporting evidence to very few people are at least discussing this possibility, and they are also, there's not a lot of historical written argumentation and debate going on about this particular subject. Either that kid's professor, that young adult professor, is a genius, or he has just, made a mistake. But one of the big things about this is, why on earth would Solzhenitsyn be a KGB agent? Well, one of the big things about this is, I think it's, first I'll say a little bit of counter-argument. The KGB tried to assassinate Solzhenitsyn multiple times, and, like the most famous one was when they used ricin poisoning, and so you'd have to think, well, what exactly is going on there? I mean, like, one side would be saying that he's working for the KGB, and the other side is saying the KGB is trying to kill them. Did he go rogue or something? And even if he had, even before, what would be the motivation? Like, what's his mission? What is he trying to accomplish for them? And because so few people are talking about that, other than that one question that was raised at a Q&A forum, it's difficult to know. So here, I'm just going to throw something out. I began to just look at some stuff, and I found a book online. It was on books.google.com from Elisa Kurzi, Kurzi, and she is saying, that Solzhenitsyn went on to praise the Vladimir Putin rise to power. And I guess we can only sort of say something that, Vladimir Putin was a former KGB operative as well, stationed in Germany, speaks excellent German. One of the things about that is just, would this be something like, they planned the rise of Putin from the beginning, and then, they wanted to predict the fall of the Soviet Union, so then we could see the demise of Boris Yeltsin post, Soviet era, and then the rise of Vladimir Putin, and Solzhenitsyn was in on the whole thing. Starting to get complicated, but that's all I could go with, and that's all I could theorize, and that's all I could really muster up because of, just the lack of people discussing this. But, there is this, history professor, whoever he is, he wasn't identified by name, who brought this theory up. And I was just, once again, quite surprised when I put this into Google and absolutely no one was talking about it. Or at least that I didn't find. If anyone has a link, they can feel free to share something. But we haven't really established an enormous motivation, and there are alternative historians all over the world pushing things. I mean, even more fascinating than this one, Solzhenitsyn, I think it's more fascinating to hear that Henry Kissinger's father was working for the KGB. He was, people often refer to Henry Kissinger's father as a former school teacher in the town of Fürth in Germany, but as I understand, he was actually the superintendent of schools, and he had actually had somewhat of a substantial administrative position. And I just find that to be so much more fascinating. Was Henry Kissinger's father working for the KGB, and Henry Kissinger's rise to power was, all mixed into just this wing of global elitism, bringing in the British and the Rockefellers and the former Soviet Union. So it's like, once again, the biggest point is, alternative historians are either saying something that is brilliant, or they're saying something that is just kind of far out and wacky that they will never be held accountable for because no one can disprove what didn't happen. No one can disprove that, the negative. Or at the very least, it's quite difficult, and it can sort of defy some principles of logic in doing so. I would really like it if, maybe over some time, I'm going to keep kind of exploring this one, and maybe some sort of new information would come up that would really get more of a definitive answer. But one of the big things about Solzhenitsyn being a KGB agent, having the training to compose a 7,500-line poem and being able to remember it all, this isn't just... I mentioned, people can remember a text. Like, if I understand, it wasn't until 50 years after the death of Muhammad that the Quran was transcribed. Like, people passed it around from memory, the entire Quran, and many people did this successfully. I mean, I've read that once before. Again, that's something you can't quote me on, but, that's like a book that is 4/5 the size of the New Testament, but it's an enormous amount of dialogue. And many Muslims do memorize the Quran in its entirety. Also, the Mahabharata in India, a 100,000-line poem, many people learn enormous amounts of that, and they do that through a form of singing. They sing the Mahabharata, and in Islam they use a form of chanting to memorize the Quran. But this isn't just, reciting someone else's words. This is composing your own original work and being able to memorize it. The motivation for Solzhenitsyn, as I understand, was he wanted to really share what was going on in the Gulag and share the sort of experiences that were happening. And he also talks about this in the book that Jordan Peterson praises so much, The Gulag Archipelago. But one thing that we can say is, it is possible for the human brain to remember that much. And, I don't think that it's impossible for someone to compose something completely in their mind, and use a sort of mnemonic device to remember things. Why would this historian think that the only way he could have done that is if he had been a KGB agent? I mean, when you don't have any sort of, reasons put forth to support that in the other side, it's like, I'm talking only about the memory things. Was there a particular reason why he thought that he couldn't compose words in his mind and remember them? It's very difficult. I don't think I could compose a 7,500-line poem and remember the entire thing, but, I was even told once that in ancient Greece, people would memorize the entire epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey. They would memorize those entire things, and then they would recite them in public. It's like, like you would stand on a stage and, people could come by and hear parts of the Iliad and the Odyssey. The human brain can do extraordinary things. So you don't necessarily have to have KGB training for that, The biggest thing that you would need is a sharp memory and, above average intelligence, which everybody agrees that Solzhenitsyn had. He was not some doofus, or he wasn't some kook that they kind of just put in the role. Because there are a lot of alternative historical things that people say about people like that. Like, there are a lot of theories about Isaac Newton and even, Herbert Spencer and Charles Darwin, but that's another upload. And, well, what do you think? Do you think there's any possibility that because Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn composed a 7,000-line poem without the use of pen and paper that he had to have been a KGB agent? I know. Not the most entertaining commentary, but it's just like, you just kind of got to tell it like it is sometimes. You just kind of have to say the genuine feeling that you have, and I guess that's that. But what do you think? And if you have anything to say at all, please drop a comment below, and until next time.